Hey, beautiful human. So, in today's video, what I'm going to cover is a very simple framework that I use on my email list that has brought in, 854K in profits over the last year. I'm going to take it step by step, give you an example so you can get the hang of things, and also share some real stories because that's what it's all about in this video to hopefully help you if you've got an email list or social media handle or anything like that. It's the same framework that I've used to bring in, hundreds of clients over the last 2 years. It's the most authentic framework that I've used, and I sort of invented it by chance over figuring it out, through trial and error. We're all content scientists here. So I'm excited to show you, but before that, I want to give you a little bit of context so you understand where I'm coming from, because I did run my own agency, over the last 7 years, scaled it to 12 people. We were bringing in 50 to 100K a month. It was exhausting, don't get me wrong. I did learn a lot along the way, but that method, that way of scaling was just brutal. It was like cold outbound, cold emails, sales calls all the time. I was constantly on the hustle bus where at the heart I wanted to write. I wasn't destined to manage an entire team and be a CEO. I was more of a creative at heart. So that was sort of what dawned on me. But when I founded Modern Maker, my mentorship program, I brought with me that agency hustle. So I would still send like 100 DMs a day, book sales calls, get all the objections and all of that. And I just thought that that was the best way of going about it. But then after, experimenting and having a little think about how I wanted to do things, I realized I wanted my content to do the selling for me. So in this video, I won't go through the content strategy on LinkedIn. There's other videos on the channel you can look at. Feel free to hit subscribe below and have a look. Would highly appreciate having you here, and your support means the world to me. So anyway, as I built my LinkedIn to 46,000 followers, I would get people on email, which, I do have an email marketing background, and I love when people read emails, when I write emails, naturally as a writer. So once somebody gets to the actual email list, that's where the fun begins, right? And there is frameworks for e-commerce and all of that sort of do the whole last chance thing and whatever, but that is conventional e-commerce. If we are in the coaching space, for example, selling info products and all of that, I've seen a lot of people do like fake timers and fake scarcity and urgency. And if you're anything like me that is a little more creative or a bit more introverted, wants to be a bit more authentic, what I found works best is telling real, authentic stories. Because number one, you're just collecting an incident that happened. It doesn't have to be some crazy hero's journey. Like on LinkedIn, especially, we hear a lot of these people who were broke and now they're not, who were depressed and now they're not. And it just looks inauthentic if you read between the lines, because you're just doing this whole hero's journey for engagement bait. If they did have something, of course, by no means not latching onto that, but the majority, seems to use these hooks just to grow an audience. And for me, one of the frameworks that got me off the DMs, off the sales calls, I don't do any of that anymore. I just get people, make an offer on LinkedIn to subscribe to my email list every day with a post, send them a lead magnet, and then make an offer on my email list to buy something. And I could sit here and overcomplicate everything, studying all these copywriters and ways of doing things. I just found something that works for me and keeps things simple, and that is the story, lesson, pivot, offer framework. Now, story, lesson, pivot, offer does exactly what it says on the tin, right? We find a little 5-second moment. It doesn't have to be a crazy story, and where most people go wrong is they tell a summary, not a story. If you tell me I went to uni this year and then I got my first job here and then after that I founded my business, like you're summarizing a decade of your life. What we want is to tell a story we can literally draw on paper. If you can draw it, it is a 5-second moment. So that is the first part of the framework. So the way that I do it is I use Google Keep on my phone here, very simply, and just write one-liners of events that happened. So at the time of this recording, last week we were in hospital on Valentine's Day because my wife had high blood pressure. So wife had high blood pressure. Now, thankfully, everything's fine with her. I'll get to that in a moment. But that is a one-liner, right? I slept on a couch for 4 days. Another one-liner. And these are true. These are real. My doggy peed all over the living room because we were in hospital. There's another one-liner, right? Or it was so hot I got a rash on my chest after a run. There's another one-liner. There was a Bulgarian lady, for example, who told me every day is exactly the same. Now, these are just coming to me as I speak. Another one is the Golden State Warriors got Jimmy Butler, right? So it doesn't have to be crazy. It's just a one-liner story to start triggering your thoughts. Because when it comes to writing, 80% of it is the way you ideate, and 20% is when you get writing. So we've covered the story part. So hopefully what you can do after is start writing one-liners for yourself, and then this will make sense. The second part of the framework is lesson, because we've got story, lesson, pivot, offer. Now, every little story we have, and as we were kids, we were told bedtime stories and all of that. Those were slightly longer. These ones need to be no more than 200-300 words per email. Every story has a lesson, right? So I mentioned a few. I'm going to show you how we draw out those lessons from the stories. So, for example, we have, when I was sat in hospital, we had to prepare for something, which was my daughter's birth, right? So preparation was the lesson. When I slept on the couch, there was an element of endurance or gratitude because it didn't matter. Right, so those are two lessons that I'm drawing from that. Or the Bulgarian lady who said every day is exactly the same. The lesson here is probably monotony. Right, so we don't think of the lesson, we think of the story first, then we grab the lesson. Because the lesson is what is going to pivot, which is the third part of the framework, story, lesson, pivot, into us making an offer later. So once we've taken out all the lessons on each story and we write about it, it's time to pivot the story in order to match it in a business context to the product or the service that we are selling, right? So pivots are fairly easy. I always think in my head before I pivot, I say, just like in business coaching, just like in business mentorship. Now, if you're a web developer, for example, it's just like in web design, just like in animation. And you start to think, is there a point in this story and lesson that I can almost tie a little bow tie on? So in this case that I'm explaining, I'll share with you an example as we went through the hospital, right? So we were in hospital for 4 days. That's the story, because we were waiting for my daughter to be welcomed into the world. The lesson had a lot to do with preparation. So I scheduled the little emails out there and made about $3,000 in sales by scheduling and, having a suitcase and ordering food and being there for mommy. So preparation, just like in business, where preparation makes or breaks the deal. So now here's where I'm swerving the story into a pivot, right? I'm just pivoting away from that story in order to make an offer. Or in my eyes, what I was selling last week on my email list was 50 content templates to write really quickly. So in this hospital example, just like when you do your LinkedIn content, it requires preparation. And sometimes you got to plug and play, sometimes you got to think. But if you're on team plug and play and you want to write fast and you want the preparation already done for you, you see how now this is a pivot of that story. And now this makes the offer side of it really easy to grasp, right? So we said, just like when writing your LinkedIn content, you need preparation. That's why I've prepared the 50 content templates for you, which you can grab below. And now the offer is basically, if it is a digital product, I can now plug the link. And when it comes to email, I really love just plugging the raw link because people can't miss it. It's like conventional. No need to like underline it or put that click here stuff. Right, so now the offer is so passive, and if you are somebody who likes to be a little more aggressive and add scarcity and urgency and do all of that, go ahead. There's no problem at all. But to me, these little passive stories where we make that offer, now I've told you a little bit about myself, so you get to know me. I tell you the way that I think by drawing a lesson. I give you the context when I make the pivots. So not only is there trust built, not only is there authenticity built, when I do make the offer, people have told me when I use the story lesson pivot offer framework, it doesn't feel like they're being sold to, because they also get value from the story, or they're entertained in many cases. And for the ones who buy can buy. Now, on the offer side, if, for example, I'm running this story lesson pivot offer framework for 9 days, let's say, as we cross after the 5th day, I will very naturally say, because I know there's a deadline. If it's not a digital product and it's a workshop, for example, and it's next Tuesday, well, I'm going to say the doors close next Tuesday, so there's 4 more days to go. I'm very truthy. So this is a much less salesy approach that for me works like a charm, because you basically just write those little one-liners, and when I sit and write my emails, everything just comes through. So just to summarize, we've done story lesson pivot offer. It's the 4 little bits of this framework. We start with one-liners, we draw the lesson, we pivot by making a little bow tie in context to our product or our business line, and then passively put an offer down. Now, I hope that was useful, and lucky for you today, where I am actually, there was a Wi-Fi issue, so I'm just recording it on my Osmo off the cuff. But in the description, I will put this in writing as well, so you can skim through it, have a look, and draw your own examples. And you can keep that lifetime access. There's no problem whatsoever. But I would say there's so many little micro incidents. And just to sort of end this video on a good note, we welcomed my daughter Nefeli last week. And I wrote a post inside Modern Maker, my mentorship community, where I made the most sales ever because I wrote off-the-cuff stories in real time. This time, some of them were scheduled because we didn't know what was going to happen. But even on the hospital bed when mommy and daughter were resting, I just wanted to tell the world how excited I was. So those emails were literally me wearing the same clothes for like the 4th consecutive day, bags under my eyes, 3 hours of sleep, but that was the truth, right? Not everything needs to be as rosy. That was my truth last week, and sales were flooding in. The messages I was getting were sensational. They were like, thank you for being so authentic. And to top that off, even though it doesn't have to do directly with the story lesson pivot offer framework, on the 3rd or 4th day when we did come home, or I came home to clean up the house, I recorded an off-the-cuff Loom video for the product and just shared the behind the scenes. Again, like a little mini story. And some of the comments were like, man, that was the best intro. I can't believe how authentic you are. Now, to me, normally I would spend hours and hours and hours making the product. But this time it was a bit messy, a bit unfinished, a bit raw. I made an announcement with one of the stories on email to say, I'll be fixing this and you get lifetime access, and just sort of offered them, an entire lifetime access plan for the same price. And people started roaring at it. They were excited. The feedback that was coming was incredible, just because I was raw and authentic, just because I followed my truth in that present moment. So why do I tell you this? Because storytelling in this way, with this sort of micro 5-second moment approach, shows the true essence of who you are. And people buy you before buying into what you do. And I think that is really important, because especially in the coaching space or mentorship space, first they buy your courses, right? They buy the information. Then the second tier buyer buys into results. They buy into, oh, he did this for, Tom, Dick, and Harry and Jane. He can do this for me. They see themselves in the result. The third tier is them buying into who you are and your presence and being around you as a person. And I can't tell you how this little story lesson pivot offer framework has changed the way I see content, because nowadays I enjoy it. I can't wait to tell stories. A lot of people, even yourself watching this video, may know a little bit more about me: having 5 pets, loving watermelons, hating Crocs, being a Golden State Warriors fan, a musician, or a runner. Maybe you're nodding, maybe you're not. But this all came through this framework. Now, it doesn't mean you have to tell a story about every single thing you can imagine and overly dramatize it. But these little incidents are what make you so human, right? And as I'm saying this, here's another example, because I said running, right? You went for a run and that's the story. The lesson was, I don't know, you ran a marathon, right? So that has endurance. Just like in business, you need endurance because it's a marathon, not a sprint. And to build this type of endurance, this is what I teach in my, performance program, or this performance product, or this business product. Now you see that little story there already has a story lesson pivot offer. And one thing I forgot to share in that is, if you've noticed, because they are 5-second moments or these little visualizations we can draw, they come across as images, right? We're painting these images. People can already see themselves or see you in that. And it doesn't even allow the brain to go, oh, what happened here and what happened there. So if you can't draw it on paper, turn that into another story. So with the one that I told you on the hospital bed, I can give you a little other story about the car ride home and how happy we were, and how I almost fucked up because I stepped in a puddle, right? Or whatever. I can tell you a story about when we opened the doors and we met the dogs, right, with our daughter. So again, every little 5-second moment is something for you to be able to package up, go out there and tell that story. And I would be curious if you wanted to do your one-liners and post them down in the comments below. I would be more than happy to chime in and see what it is you do. But yeah, I hope you found this video enjoyable and you learned something. Again, I will drop the link so you can analyze it better in the comments below. Feel free to hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.